So now we're going to study about collections. Collections is one of the most important topic of core Java and is very widely used in Selenium, Appium, and when designing frameworks. Right. Basically, if we talk about collections are basically we can call it as a framework. We can call it as an API. Basically, it contains a lot of classes and interfaces, right? So collection was introduced in Java in Java 1.2 and later on updated in JDK 5, right? So collection, if I talk about, let's say prior to collection, there were arrays. So arrays, why arrays are used to store multiple values, right? And there were some drawback related to arrays, as in the size of array is fixed, right? So while defining an array, you need to define the size of an array as well, and that is actually fixed. It remains constant, right? The second thing is that it can contain only one type of data, so if you are storing string values, you can only store string values. If you are storing integer values, you can only store integer values. So these are not very dynamic in nature. So this these are the two major issues, and the second one is not very important, though, like it's not a very major issue. As in, this is another important thing with this sort of thing. We don't face any type casting issues, right? So if it supports only one type of data, then there are no typecasting issues. So we're going to talk about what typecasting is, right, in the later lectures. But this is one of the major issue, right, which makes array non-dynamic, right? It is the size is fixed, right? And due to these issues, the collections it came into the picture. Now, there is no separate API or a jar file that you need to add for collection. It comes within your Java library itself. You need not to add any add or download any different jar file like for Selenium, for APM, for other APIs you do. So collections comes within your Java libraries itself. So collection is nothing, it contains interfaces and classes. So there are a set of classes and interfaces provided by this collection framework that we're gonna see how we're gonna use them. So whatever thing that we do with arrays in Java, like we are storing multiple values, same thing we are actually doing with collections itself. As the name suggests, collection, we are actually collecting multiple data itself. So the benefit of using collections is that the very first thing, the size is infinite, right? You can keep on adding values, you can keep on storing data, you need not to define any size, the size is infinite, right? The second thing is that it can contain multiple type of data. So you can even store the data in a single format, or you can have multiple type of data stored in a collection. So collection, if we take a look over here, collection itself is an interface, right? Collection is an interface which is inside this library, Java Util Collection, right? So there are some interfaces that inherits this collection, which are set, list, queue, and utilities, right? Map, it does not directly inherit the collection interface. It works individually itself, right? But these are the major interfaces that inherits your collection interface. Even utilities is actually not an interface. These are the two classes which are there inside utilities. So these are the three main interfaces: set, list, and queues. So like you see arrays over here, arrays is actually a class, right? This is an internal class in this API, right? So arrays, if you talk about this arrays class, at times you need to convert array to a array list, right? So at that point of time, this arrays class is used, right? So you can Google around about arrays class, right? This is also important to know what exactly this class is doing, right? Just Google around and we'll see more examples in collections. So what we need to study in collection are the three important interfaces, that is map, set, and list. So these are the three interfaces. We cannot create an object of these interfaces. The classes that are available inside these interfaces are these classes like hash map, hash set, array list, apple link list, link hash map, right? So these are the classes. We need to create an object of these classes whenever we are using any one of these functionality, and these are the interfaces available in connections. So hash map, hash table, tree map, linked hash map, it inherits map interface. Same way hash set, linked hash set, tree set, it inherits set interface, and array list, vector, linked list, it inherits list interface. So hash map, hash set, and array list. These are the most frequently used classes, right? So we'll be studying about them a lot, right? We're gonna see example related to array list, related to hash set, related to hash map, because these are the three classes which are very frequently used. So we'll start looking at these three classes one by one, right? But before that, there is a concept of a wrapper as in wrapper classes, right? So we're going to study about wrapper classes first. This is again another important concept, right? Wrapping, unwrapping, and then we're going to start with the array list. So wrapper classes are those classes which are used to wrap primitive data types, right? So primitive data types, as in we have data types like int, char, boolean, long. There are around 8 primitive data types, and for each data type there is a class like which is actually wrapping it. Like for integer we have for int we have integer, char we have character, boolean it's the boolean class. Long, if we write long with small l, it is a data type. The long with a capital L is basically a class, then float, then double, right? So these are like the primitive types, which if we are using this class, then all these types will gonna behave like an object of these wrapper classes. Now, these are very important because if we talk about collection work on these classes itself, right? Because if in case you are storing some int values, then you will be providing this integer class. Similarly, if you are storing a float value or a double value, you will be giving the class name that is float or double. So it means when you are storing their values, when you are storing integer values, the collection will actually gonna accept these values in a form of an integer object, because collection it works on classes and objects. You can never store a primitive values directly into a collection. So that is the only reason these wrapper classes are being introduced. Now let's take an example. Let's say I create a new class. First, we'll create a package. And I'll be creating a class over here. Let's name it as Autoboxing. We'll try to understand what Autoboxing is, right? So let's say I create a variable over here and store a numeric value. I'll say int var equal to 10, and then I'll say integer. I'll gonna convert this value into the integer class object. So I'll say integer obj equal to new integer. So I am going to create an object of the integer class. Now there is a constructor that accepts the numeric value, right? Or it can also accept the numeric value in a form of a string, and then we're going to convert it into integer. So over here, I'll give the value as var over here, right? And now if I try to print the object, it is not going to print the address of this object, right? It is actually going to print the value that is 10. Now that is what it is doing. It is actually converting the primitive to the object of an integer class. So that is what wrapping is. And that is what you can see in this PDF. Wrapper classes are those classes which are used to wrap primitive variables in such a way that they behave like an object. Right, so that is what we have done over here. We have converted the integer value, the primitive value into an object, right? And that is what is called as a wrapper class. Sorry, wrapping. In the same way, we can convert any primitive data type value into their respective class objects. Now, what I can do if I want to store this value, I can have a reference created of a type. Let's say this is a reference. I can create a type of an integer class as well, or I can create it with the primitive data type as well. Right. So this is what is called as unwrapping, and this is called as wrapping. So in wrapping, we convert primitive into an object, and in unwrapping, we convert object into a primitive. So either you will be using these things explicitly, or these will be automatically used when you will be working on collections. So when you use collections, so these things will happen automatically, and that is what we called as auto boxing. And if this thing happens, then we call it as auto unboxing. Right, so that is what auto boxing and auto unboxing is. So in collections, these things are automatically handled. So this is an important term that is being asked in interviews as well. Or you can call it as unboxing as well, right? There's no need to write auto, right? Auto boxing or unboxing. So if we take a look over here, autoboxing is basically a technique in which compiler it automatically wraps and unwraps the primitive data types in order to store them in a array list. So here I have mentioned array list, but in any collection class, the same thing is happening.